Hey friends, welcome to Torah Saturday. Today we are going to be studying two parts of the Torah portion, Ki Tisa. So we'll start as we always do with our blessing for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Thank you, Divine One, for giving us this opportunity to learn and immerse ourselves in Torah. All right, so let's jump right in. Do you want me to share let me share the link to the source sheet in the chat. Oh, I forgot to send out an email last night, but I'm glad you two made it. Um, Had a couple of things going on.
Thank you so much for taking the time in your busy day.
Okay, there we go. There is the link if you want to read ahead. So, would someone please unmute and read this verse from Exodus 32?
When the
When
people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, the people gathered against Aaron and said to him, "Come, make us a god who shall go before us. For we do not know what has happened to Moses, the man who brought us from the land of Egypt."
Okay, great. Thank you. So let's spend, this is after Mount Sinai, and we had kind of taken a break from the narrative where we've had just a couple of weeks where there's just been very detailed descriptions of how to build the tabernacle and how to do Aaron's robes. And, there were some laws before that. And now we're back to this narrative. And so what's happening?
the people who were just slaves, 40 days ago or something like that, or I guess twice 40 now, but they're very insecure.
Yeah, they're insecure. And how can you tell they're insecure?
We don't know. We don't know what happened to Moses.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, Dan, welcome. Um, I'll put the source sheet in the chat for you if you want to peek ahead, but we'll be sharing it as we go along. Yeah, where's this Moses guy? He's the one that led us through all of this, and now he's gone. So, their answer so how do they respond to their insecurity?
Complaining.
Are they only complaining?
They're asking for a god, like they saw how they saw people um, interact with God where they came from.
Yeah, they're looking for symbology. They're looking for an image. They're looking for connection of some sort.
Yeah, yeah. So they need something. And there is actually in the Musar literature, there is a discussion of this in the context of patience, where there was a misunderstanding about when Moses said he'd come back, whether it was going to be the morning or the evening. And if they'd been just a little bit more patient, none of this would have happened. So, interesting take. So then what happens? Guy, could someone read the next verse 4?
I can go, this he took from them and cast in a mold and made it into a molten calf. And they exclaimed, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt.
Okay. All right. So everyone gave Aaron their gold earrings and what have you. And he has made a mold and made a molten calf. Let's see, what was this next one? So So before we look at like his Cooney commentary, we see the word mold and molten twice. If we remember back a couple of weeks, do we um, I think is there a reason why that word was mentioned twice, perhaps?
For the tabernacle?
Yeah, in the tabernacle story, we saw a different word. Um, Make
Hammered.
two cherubim of gold, make them of hammered work. So we had talked about this idea that hammered work was okay, but molten was not okay. Um, or as it says in Leviticus, do not turn to idols or make molten gods for yourself. So this was part of kind of the story that you shouldn't be making molten gods, even though Leviticus was later, but it was referred to in Exodus as well. So suddenly, here we are just a couple months after the Exodus, they're making a molten god, which is not so good. Um, so let's look at what his Cooney had to say about this.
They said, "These are your gods, O Israel." It is um, conceivable that these fellow travelers were so foolish as to credit a newly cast golden calf as having orchestrated the Exodus, which had occurred 3 months before the calf had been cast in gold. The
It was
sorcerer,
actually, is it conceivable? It wasn't, it is. So he's asking the question. Are they really that they're really that dumb that they could have thought this just a couple months later? Okay,
the
continue.
sorcerers among the mixed multitude, so the ventriloquists, I'd say, were able to create the illusion that some deity is speaking from their mouth. They now created the illusion that this calf had addressed them from its mouth, and that it was far superior to any Egyptian deity, as it was made of pure gold, so that what came forth from such a mouth must be sacred.
Okay, so what's going on? What's his Cooney trying to? He's a later commentator, probably 17th century, 18th century, I think. So what's the question he's trying to answer here?
So these people had just seen all the mighty works of God.
Yeah,
Why did they think something that was just made by a human could be a god?
yeah, great question. I mean, we all look at this like, really? You made this statue, and so what's his answer?
I
Someone
don't know,
else?
sarcasm is the right word about it, but he's almost incredulous that they could think that this calf did these things retroactively before the calf was even created. How could the people think that? Uh,
Yeah, and I think he's saying I think he's kind of suggesting that it would be stretch the imagination to think that people could believe that unless there was something else that might make them believe in it. So who is he blaming for the people's belief? He talks about this thing, the mixed multitude. And so let me give some context on that. So when the Exodus finally happened and people started leaving, and there was 600,000 Israelites, and they said plus a mixed multitude. And the mixed multitude was considered like Egyptians and other folks who also didn't, maybe believed in God or just didn't want to be a part of Egypt. And sometimes the rabbis would blame them for all kinds of things. These were the rabble, these were the hangers on, these were the prostitutes, whomever. And so he's kind of, I think, that's what they mean by the mixed multitude. And among this mixed multitude, there were these sorcerers, or as Allison said, maybe ventriloquists, people who could do, carnival tricks, basically. And so, what does he say that these sorcerers have done?
special effects.
Yeah, yeah. Earth in the greatest ancestors, so that kind of thing. So, what do you think of that, Deanne, you have any kind of opinion about this conversation?
Well, it gives a whole different look thinking, well, were they tricked? Was it, special effects
Hmm.
that could have made people that were insecure and concerned make them wonder?
Yeah.
It also, to me, kind of raises the question when you're open to the power of suggestion, is that meaning there's a vacuum or something within yourself that needs to be filled, and the first thing that comes along can fill it? Or were these people going more than halfway towards worshiping this idol?
It's a good question. And it kind of brings in the point that someone made earlier about, just coming out of slavery, being liberated is, I shouldn't put quotes around liberated. Being liberated doesn't mean there wasn't trauma and fear and discord and uncertainty kind of going on. Um, so yeah, it's a much more complicated picture, I think, as Neil illustrates. Okay, let's take this a little bit further. So we talked about the hammered good, molten bad. And so then right after the people say, okay, here's your God, um, what is Aaron's reaction?
When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it. And Aaron announced, "Tomorrow shall be a festival of God."
So thank you. One thing is that Hebrew is Aharon uh, Vayiven. Um, it just says when Aaron saw. So it's Vayira Aharon. It's when Aaron and saw Aaron, but it doesn't say this. This is kind of the implied. So one thing is, what is it that? So when Aaron saw, he built an altar before it, and Aaron announced, "Tomorrow shall be a festival of God." And he says to Yud He Vav He. So it's not it's not Elohim. Sorry, that wasn't what I wanted to say. Where it says here, Ele Elohecha, here is your God. That's kind of the generic form of God, like God or gods. It could be idols, could be the divine. But here, Aaron is saying the true name of God, the Yud He Vav He. So what's going on here? Is this clear? Is it ambiguous? What is Aaron up to, who created the golden calf and now is making this statement?
One possibility, it feels like the people have something shiny in front of them, but maybe Aaron's trying to trick them back onto the correct path again, saying, "Yeah, maybe we're not going to celebrate this calf. We're going to celebrate the real divine Almighty."
Yeah, yeah. He hasn't. Maybe he hasn't. Just when I first heard this story, I was like, why did Aaron sell out so quickly, and why was he given such a free pass? And I think Neil's interpretation might partly answer that question. It's like, well, he was trying to kind of, you know, maybe go along to get along, but then he's trying to kind of bring people back towards the divine. Um, let's see what Rashi has to say about this. Deanne, you want to read this one?
A festival to the Lord, not to the golden calf. In his heart, the feast, was for heaven, the Lord. He felt confident that Moses would return by the morrow and that they would worship the omnipresent.
Okay, great. Thank you. So it seems like Rashi is kind of giving, and this was from Rashi when he gave his commentaries, often, I mean, the guy had just an encyclopedic knowledge of all of the Midrash, all of the prior commentary. And so he would give like little capsule summaries of the commentary. And here, this comment is from Leviticus Rabbah, which is from the Midrash. And so this kind of is along the lines of Neil's interpretation. It's like, hey, although he does talk about this delaying thing, he's like, Moses is going to be back. Let's just, muddy the waters a little bit, and then things will be fine. So that's Rashi's take on this. Any comments on this, or should we move to the next one? Okay. Okay, so here is Ramban Nachmanides, a few hundred years later than Rashi, often disagreed with earlier commentators. What is Rambam's take on this?
And Aaron saw. The meaning of this verse is that Aaron saw them set on evil, intent upon making the calf. And he arose and built an altar and proclaimed, tomorrow shall be a feast to the Eternal, so that they should bring offerings to the proper name of God upon the altar, which he built to his name, and that they should not build altars to the shameful thing, and that their intent in the offering should be to none save upon the Eternal only. It is possible that Aaron said, tomorrow shall be a feast, in order to delay them, thinking that perhaps Moses would come in the meantime and they would abandon the calf.
Okay, so a little similar to Rashi, what's one of the, maybe, do you notice anything that he has added to this so far?
I noticed the shameful thing.
Yeah. He also says he saw them as set on evil. So it seems like there was a little bit more, it doesn't have that flavor of maybe they were just afraid, maybe they were misinformed, maybe they were tricked. He really thought that, or maybe he was just looking at, for whatever reason they got here, this is a really evil road that the people are starting to go down.
Yeah, people are getting a crowd mentality, or you can even call it a mob mentality, where whatever gets shouted, people latch onto it and run with it.
Yeah. Okay.
There was something that Annie had shared with me when we were doing in advance of the community Torah study, that even when Aaron suggested that the people who came to him asked their wives and sons and daughters for earrings, that he was thinking maybe the wives would put up a fuss, and that would also delay things. So I was wondering where that idea of delay came from, and now I'm seeing that had been credited in other parts too.
Yes. There's also a midrash that the women did not make a contribution. It was only the men. And I didn't bring that in today. So, okay, let's continue. Let's continue with Ramban's explanation. So he's hoping, okay, we'll kind of delay things. Moses gets back. They'd abandon the calf, but then what happens?
But they rose up early in the morning and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. Now, Scripture does not say, and they offered burnt offerings to it and brought peace offerings to it. The reason for that is there were some people amongst them who intended them to be for the name of the Holy One, blessed be he, as Aaron had said, but some of them became corrupted and sacrificed to the calf.
Yes. And that's referring to like the next verse in Exodus. They just brought up, and then they sat down to eat and drink and rose to dance. So, yeah, so what's kind of the scene then?
It's a festival day.
Yeah, it's becoming a festival day. And who are people making the offerings to? How did Aaron's plan kind of work out, according to the Rambam narrative?
Not great. It looked like they're then going to sacrifice them to the calf, although it's like Aaron was trying to give him a diversion from the other diversion.
Yeah, yeah. And did everybody sacrifice to the calf?
Sounds like a real mixed bag. I mean, some people may not have even known what they were sacrificing to if they get a little drunk and a little bit giddy. Other people, it was pretty clear they were picking one direction or the other.
Yeah, yeah. And so I find this so interesting that Rambam would bring this up because it's so easy to think of past events as well. Everyone was doing the same thing. Like everybody jumped on board with the calf. But it's kind of more like today when there's all kinds of stuff going on and it's stressful and chaotic, and maybe some people are going down one path and other people are going down another path. And it's mixed. And some people are just like going down a path, not really paying attention to what's what.
And
So,
some people are dazzled by the special effects.
right, right. Yeah. Yeah. And other people are like, okay, well, I have a path, and it did this also, it kind of when we kind of get to down here, and it says, and they rose up um to eat and drink and then rose to dance, and the Cecil B. DeMille Ten Commandments, this was really like portrayed as the scene of debauchery and, you know, um, an orgy in the making. And then Moses comes back, but this is as far as we're going to take it. But there is a little bit more commentary. So there's another kind of take on this. So could someone read this Vaikra Rabbah? It's back to this. Yes, there's another take on this story. Someone read this one, please. Rabbi Berekia.
In the name of Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana, interpreted the verse regarding Aaron. When Israel performed that act, initially they approached her. They said, "Rise, craft for us a god." When he did not heed them, they stood against him and killed him. Afterward, they approached Aaron. They said to him, "Rise, craft for us a god." When Aaron heard this, he was immediately afraid. This is what is written. Aaron saw, and he built an altar before him. He was afraid due to the one slaughtered before him. Aaron said, "What shall I do?" They killed her, who was a prophet. Now, if they kill me as I am a priest, the verse that is written will be realized in their regard. If a priest and a prophet will be killed in the sanctuary of the Lord, and they will be immediately exiled.
Okay, so thank you, Deanne. So to talk about this last one, I left it in because it illustrates like one of the things that the rabbis, Savik Rabbah, this was Midrash, probably written in the first few centuries of the Common Era, and they just acted like everything happened simultaneously, that what was in the Torah, that people knew kind of what was going on later. So I find this a bit of a stretch that Aaron knew what was going to happen in Lamentations, which was written after, thousands of years later, that he would somehow know 1,000 years in the future what was going to happen. So if we look aside from that, though, Hur was the grandfather of Bezalel, who was the craftsman who created the tabernacle. So he was probably a talented craftsman. And what according to this story, what happened to her?
So people asked him to make an idol and he refused.
Right.
Then they killed him.
Then they killed him. And I think we saw that earlier. Maybe it was later. Oh yeah, it was Pirkei to Rabbi Eliezer, and he saw that Hur, the son of his sister, was slain, and so he kind of maybe he felt like they made him an offer he couldn't refuse. It's like, all right, they've already killed one person.
So maybe there were two Hurs. There was the Hur in Lamentations, and there was the Hur that the Midrash said was at the time of Aaron.
I think Lamentations was just more generic, a priest and a prophet. And so he's like, oh, well, Hur was a prophet, and I'm the priest in this prophecy, in this thing in Lamentations. So we can't let them kill both of us. I mean, it's a little bit of an apologetic for Aaron. Instead of saying, oh my God, I don't want to be killed too, it's like, I want to save the people from this terrible fate of killing a priest and a prophet. So that's just a unnecessary apologetic.
That's, I mean, the whole Midrash thing is there are all these stories that were floating around that weren't written in the Torah.
Yeah, exactly. And the Torah, in my opinion, the Torah's brilliance is the way that it displays the humanity of people. And here they can't seem to be, they're not comfortable with the idea that Aaron may have been afraid that he would be killed too. So that's why he did this, and they try to make this into an act of nobility to prevent the people from being exiled. And oh, thank goodness Aaron did this. Otherwise they never would have gotten to, that's, for some people that might be meaningful. For me, it just seems like a stretch.
Trying to answer the question of why wasn't Aaron killed?
Yeah.
After he did such an evil and an evil.
That's true. It's true. Aaron was taking one for the team, so that's why his punishment was light. Okay. All right, let's skip here. We're going to move to a different topic, but let's just kind of say, what is your sort of takeaway from this kind of vignette and discussion that we've had? Is it interesting? Is it relevant? Is it neither? Is it both? What are your thoughts?
I think it shows there's a lot more nuance, a little more color to the story than I had realized previously. A lot of people internalize kind of the Ten Commandments version, or just the very shallow version of the people were desperate, Aaron did a bad thing, God got mad, and it runs much deeper than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I agree. It really shows how the mindset of the people, they are so insecure. And then if there is trickery, it's like, but I saw it with my own eyes, heard it with my ears.
Right. That's a good point, Deanne. And they just saw the Sea of Reeds part. They saw the plagues. They used to seeing miraculous things. So, oh, here's another one. We know this God could do miracles, and now we've got the talking golden statue. So, yeah.
Thinking of how we're used to seeing 24-hour news cycles and seeing real videos from places around the world, and now there's trickery that
Hmm.
can make videos that seem very real that help um, reinforce our preconceptions.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I like that you kind of brought that into the modern world because it's so easy to look at people who maybe disagree with us politically or, see January 6th as something very differently than I might see it. And maybe there's some story behind why they believe those things that is more complicated than just kind of the surface level. Well, they're just bad people. I mean, I don't agree with
And
what they
I can
did, but there's probably a more complicated story, or maybe.
and I can be tricked too.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Um, yeah, well said. All right. So now, as I um, alluded to last night, there's after all of this, there's a lot of discussion between Moses and the divine and asking God to forgive the people for this. And the God is kind of saying, okay, I'll be forgiving. And then Moses says, okay, wow, that's great. Let me see your presence. And God says, I'll I'll make my goodness or I'll make my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim my name and but you can't see my face, so you can see my back. So put yourself in uh, this cleft, and as my presence passes by, I'll shield you, and then we get these 13 attributes of mercy, which I talked about in my High Holiday sermon. This was actually my daughter's, my younger child's bat mitzvah portion. So we have the Adonai, Adonai, El Rahun, Vihanun. Um, and then we get these attributes. And then when I was talking about this before, I kind of stopped here, forgiving iniquity and sin, but I didn't go into the yet not remitting all punishment, but visiting the iniquity of parents upon children and children's children upon the third and fourth generations. So what do you make of this? We have all these admirable traits like Hesed to the thousandth generation, slow to anger, compassion, and then we get this visiting the iniquity of parents on children. What's your take on that?
So one possible thought that just came to me, it always seems kind of creepy to talk about this. Looking at it in context, I'm wondering if the divine is saying, well, even if you choose to just sacrifice yourself, you're so angry you'd do anything. Consider that the consequences to the world are bigger than you. Do you
Hmm.
want to give up the life of your offspring and their offspring and even their offspring because you had a rash moment, because you did something stupid or something without good cause? And consider that before you go off the deep end.
Yeah. What do people think of that, Neil's idea? Does that kind of ring true to any of your experience in the world?
If people have everyone has parents who are messed up in some way or another, and that impacts us. And the more they're messed up, perhaps the more they'll impact us.
Yeah, I love that, Allison. Yes. Deanne, I saw you unmute.
Yeah, I agree. I you can it makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah, this isn't completely from left field. That is kind of a way of the world. Um, Now, whether that's like an attribute of God, I don't know, but that's there's there's something to this, even though on the surface it does seem a little bit creepy and and really harsh. Okay,
There's
so
also the question of why I'm such a righteous person. Why do bad things happen to good people?
mm,
And maybe it's something that my parents or grandparents or great grandparents did.
mm,
And a
interesting.
lot of this was written down when we were in exile. And, so maybe we're in exile not just because we're bad people, but maybe we're in exile because of something that happened in the past.
I love that interpretation, and actually the whole, the way it used to be in the ancient world was two countries would fight, each country or each kingdom would have its own god. You lose, their god must be stronger than your god, so your god goes away. But that didn't happen when uh, the the kingdom got conquered by the Babylonians. They said, well, actually, our God engineered our defeat because we were sinful. So that would exactly, it was a really bold move. That's why our religion survived when all the other religions at that time didn't. We said, no, no, our God is the God of history. And so this happened because of our sins. So I had never thought about this the way Allison talked about it. It probably was the third or fourth generation after the exile at that point when this was written. And then the exile came to an end right around that time. So it's like, okay, the time of our punishment is over. God is ready to forgive us and let us come back into the land. So I really like that, Allison. That's very interesting. Okay, so I guess this is our week for Ezekiel because I talked about Ezekiel, which is in our Haftarah for the week. This is not part of the Haftarah, but what does Ezekiel have to say? This is what I would call an intertext commentary. I think Ezekiel is making a commentary on this portion in Exodus. So could someone read this, please?
Only the person who sins shall die. A child shall not share the burden of a parent's guilt, nor shall a parent share the burden of a child's guilt. The righteousness of the righteous shall be accounted to them alone, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be accounted to them alone.
Okay. Thank you, Marty. And so if we put these two texts in conversation with each other, what do we see?
Contradictory.
Yeah, they're contradictory. Ezekiel was written later. So if we just look at the plain meaning, somebody comes up to Ezekiel and it's like, oh, well, and I don't remember like the prior, um, let's just go into Ezekiel and see the context. So the father was wicked. Um, why has not the son shared the burden of the father's guilt? The son has done what is right and just and has carefully kept all my laws, he shall live. But there's this question, well, why hasn't the son shared the burden? We just saw in Exodus that, hey, sins of the father get passed on. And it's like Ezekiel saying, heck no, sorry, that's not the way it is. You know,
So
people,
so is this isn't a case of God deciding the punishment in Ezekiel, this is the case of humans, right? Is that correct?
um, interesting. Let's see. Um, so I'm not sure. I mean, just looking at this, what we looked at in that verse alone, it's hard to say. But often, in scripture, they're talking about like what God does. And then here we get this just a few sentences later, this line that we quote in the High Holiday Liturgy, is it my desire that the wicked shall die, says the sovereign God. It is rather that they shall turn back from their ways and live. So, so I think I think it's a good question. Um, I think that to the biblical authors, they kind of felt like God was sort of directing a lot of what happened to people. So, kind of to your question earlier, well, why did bad things happen to good people? Well, maybe it's because their parents were sinful and there's a karmic debt that has to be paid. Let's see what this the 13 attributes, they get quoted a lot of different places and a lot of different places in the Bible. So let's look in Micah and see how Micah writes this.
Who is a God like you, forgiving iniquity and remitting transgression, not staying angry forever toward the remnant of your own people, because you love graciousness?
And then in verse 19, it goes on to another topic. It just cuts it off completely. It's like we're just going to talk about these attributes of the divine, and we're just going to erase this idea of the sins of the father being passed on to the fourth generation.
So I'm wondering at that point in time if people felt they already had a strike or two against them because of something their ancestors had done, that they figured they had nothing to lose, they could go off and do just about anything else, and it wasn't really going to change a whole lot. And maybe this is encouraging people to say, you don't have to follow a bad path, even if your ancestors did. You've got choices to make. You can make good choices.
Yeah, I love you. And Micah, as a prophet and as a book, is very positive, is very encouraging. Um, so that would be totally, as my kids would say, totally on brand for Micah. It's like, hey, just get on the right path. Because we got this forgiving divinity who's in our corner, and don't worry about what happened before. Yeah, I like that.
I guess I also like the fact, going back to the attributes, that God has kindness to the thousandth generation and only punishment to the third or fourth generation. So
Yes.
even even in this part where there's a lot more anger in the description of God, that um, there is this idea of kindness outlasting punishment.
Yes, and that's actually was Rashi's point as well. The measure of good is greater than the measure of punishment. Um, so keeping mercy for thousands, 2,000 years. So basically he's saying, 2,000 divided by 4 is 500 to 1. That's pretty good still. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good catch, Allison. Now let's look at another take on this, because one approach is just to negate it. Like the prophets are saying, no, we disagree. We're either going to refute it or we're going to erase it. But then if we look at the Targum, this was the translation of the Torah into Aramaic. with some commentary, he says not to acquit the guilty on the day of judgment, and remembering the sins of the wicked fathers upon rebellious children, upon the third or fourth generation. So how is this different? What does it mean to say rebellious children here?
I think rebelling against the divine and the commandments, not rebelling against the parent necessarily.
Right, right. And how is that different from the straight translation? Um, Here,
Uh,
in Numbers, it repeats it the same way. It just says upon children of the third and fourth generation. So why is rebellious children different?
the original translation, the children are being very passive. Here it indicates the child has committed some act that might be worthy of some punishment.
Yeah, it's kind of more in line with the Ezekiel, right? It's not all children. It's like, well, if the parent is a bad seed and then the kid is a bad seed, the kid is going to get punished as well. But it's sort of implying that if the kid is not rebellious, if the kid is a righteous person, then they're going to be okay. So this is a different take, and it's one that um, the rabbis kind of are taking a different route, which we see in Rashi here. So if we kind of explain kind of if we read this last sentence, he clears those who repent and does not clear those who will not repent. So that's a pretty important distinction, because the whole holiday of Yom Kippur is about repentance, and that we can reform, we can return to the good path. And that's kind of the directions the rabbis took, where if we were strictly interpreting the Torah, and we've talked about that before, we are not a strict word of the Torah people. That's never been our take. We're interpreting this. Even the biblical authors were not comfortable with this. Just a few years later, they're like, no, we're not so crazy about that. So here we talked about this. So let's read what the commentator Sforno had to say.
When the latest generation intensifies the evil perpetrated by their fathers and grandfathers, Jeremiah describes such a scenario when he writes, "They would not listen to me or give ear. They stiffened their necks. They acted worse than their fathers."
Right. So how is this? Sforno's much later than these other commentators. So how has this idea evolved? First we had it's all children are punished. Then we got to it's the rebellious children who are punished. And now Sforno's giving even another case.
So it seems to me he's looking at the trajectory. Are you getting worse, getting better, or staying the same? And if you're getting worse, that's not the right path.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is interesting because each of us has a choice. And even if, our messed up parents have had an impact on us, we still have a choice. And maybe we're still kind of messed up too, but we're not being at least worse than our parents were. And we don't have it within us to kind of be better. But God, this reminds me of something that I heard at a funeral once where someone was talking about their father. And their father was an alcoholic, was not a great father. But he said his father's father abandoned the family when so his grandfather abandoned his father's family when his father was like 6 or 7. And he said, at least my father didn't abandon the family. And he was a good enough father, which has put me in a position where I can be a good father to my kid. So maybe, you know, he's saying my father wasn't as bad as my grandfather. At least my father did better than my grandfather did. And that's let me do better. Whereas, he could have been even worse than his father could have been worse than his grandfather, and that would have been bad. So powerful idea. Um, and I think the last source I had, oh no, sorry. Um, let's look at this one now. Or Yisrael was by Rabbi Israel Salanter, who has created the Musar movement, very much on personal conduct. What did he have to say?
Sanhedrin states, "It is not written, he visits the sins of the fathers on children. This is when they perpetuate the act of their fathers. It stands to reason that this holds true only when the quality of the acts of the children is equivalent to the acts of the fathers, not when the acts of the fathers were qualitatively greater sins than the sinful acts of children."
So again, here we're kind of getting into this nuance. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share here. So what's your kind of take on this whole sins of the father thing? Is this something that we should erase the way I erased it in my High Holiday sermon? Or is there something meaningful and interesting we can learn from it when we kind of delve into it?
I think the seeing how the impact of your parents is upon you and being mindful of that is something that's worth contemplating.
Thank you, Allison.
And I liken it to a metaphor that you're trying to build your house on a foundation that may have some cracks in it. And what do you make of that? Do you try to repair the world, repair the foundation, make the world a little bit better to compensate? Or do you just decide you're going to live in a crappy house your whole life and walls fall down and water leaks in and you become a victim of it? And we have choices.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Neil.
I agree. Every individual has their own choices, but how they became the way they are, it's been influenced.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think understanding and delving into that really can help people understand why they are the way they are and help to make changes.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
I think another thing is we shouldn't assume that just because we're in a situation where we had a comfortable childhood and maybe we inherited some money or our parents helped us to buy our house doesn't automatically make us good. So maybe
No, it
looking
doesn't.
a little bit against, or sideways to what that is, what it says.
Well, no, that reminds me of this show, Cobra Kai. I don't know if anyone watched it, or the original Karate Kid, where there was, Mr. Miyagi and the good dojo, and there was Cobra Kai, the bad dojo, and Johnny Lawrence was kind of the champion of Cobra Kai, and he gets beaten at the end. Well, the show is kind of 30 years later, and it's talking about what's happening with Johnny Lawrence. And part of his backstory was his mother married a rich guy who was a total a-hole. I mean, was like an awful person. And so for him, like the karate was his way out, but he just had all kinds of money at his disposal, but he was just treated so poorly that it really impacted his self-esteem and, led him down a not great path. So I really like the show. It's got a great redemption arc for Johnny too, and reconciliation with Daniel. But yeah, I really like that point, Allison. That's, your point really reminded me of that. And we can all look to examples of famous or not so famous people. My grandfather, oh my God, whenever there was like a rich person who went into drug rehab, he was like, I grew up in the Depression. I have no patience for people who, they say, oh, success was too much for them and the money was too much and caused them to do A, B, and C. And I could have handled it. And, you know, love my grandfather dearly, but, uh, we don't know what people have gone through. All right. Well, any final comments as we come to a close today?
Thank you for a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciated hearing your perspectives. I learned a lot. And we'll start with just a final, I thank you to Safaria for providing such great free tools. I love the merch and, but first some Torah. It's a great thing. If you've watched the video, thank you so much. Please give us a like or a subscribe or a share, so that the social media will pass this on to other people. And please invite your friends. This is not only for experts, people with any level of knowledge. Your life experience makes you an expert on humanity, which is what Torah is here to help us understand. Take care and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you
Shabbat
so
shalom.
much.